When a customer comes to me at the bank, I want them to feel like it's on a personal level. A lot of my existing customers, I feel like we're more family than just a customer-banker relationship, and that I'm doing everything I can to help them. And when they leave my desk, I want them to say, wow, that Shelley Kearns at Happy State Bank really cares about me, and I want them to tell their friends and family that.
Let's call this meeting to order, and we'll turn it over to City Manager. 4 words to go through the agenda. Attempt to.
I think just to get us back on track here, may I do the agenda first, if that's okay?
Sounds good.
Item number 1.
They were correct.
Keep it up and quit.
We're finished. I'm moving on.
Minutes.
Lydia said they were correct.
I'm sorry?
Lydia said they were correct.
There's a nice check mark right there.
I'm
sorry.
But we digress.
Item number 2, second and final, ordinance 7319. This is changing the zoning over the corner of Western Street and Farmers Avenue. Kelly, any changes? No, sir. This is the northwest corner of the city. Item number 3, resolution suspending the proposed Atmos Energy rate increase. 90-day suspension, pretty standard thing to do in the rate increase. As you can see by the resolution, if the rate increase went through as proposed, it's a substantial increase to our residential customers. So we ask that you do this and give us a chance to work on it. Marcus or Dean, anything we need to add to it?
Unless they have questions, that's a good summary.
So tell me which numbers are proposed increase, excluding taxes or including taxes?
Which sheet are you on?
I think it's 2 of 2.
Okay.
Yeah.
The revenue retained existing rate revisions. Dean, can you help us with this one? I'm sorry. Do you have your copy? Second of your spreadsheets.
I want to know how much, what percentage the Atmos rate increase would be if we go through as is.
13.7.
Yeah, on the residents.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, 13.7 on residential.
Okay.
Yeah, it got worse when they did their cost of service study, which pushed even more of it to the residents.
But if that went through, we would not have any call to the B contract anymore if we just let that pass.
No, I can't answer that then, but yeah, we got to visit with you afternoon.
Yeah, it's got several provisions. It has a conservation rider that will be tacked in. It'll have an RRM as a rider on it. So there's a lot to discuss.
So all we're voting on is suspension of the...
And that's for 90 days.
And that gives our consultants time to go through all their numbers.
Next,
another resolution. This is a standard reimbursement resolution. This resolution applies to the project that we approved, I believe, 3 weeks ago, with the 3,100-foot long connecting line between 34th and Osage. Part and parcel of the efforts to be sure that we get the money back, either through Texas Water Development Board or the remaining ARPA funds. Moving right along, consent agenda, item A. One time of year where we see how many different filters we can buy for all of our cars, trucks, and heavy equipment. You guys spent that much a year on oil filters before?
Spent that much on body work. Continues on. Because those never got changed when you got it.
So my shop all the time, they need to be changed. Okay, jumping into item P. Fertilizers and botanical products. Fertilizers, herbicides, insecticides, various related items used at our parks, at the various public improvement districts, the athletic fields, and the golf courses. This item is up for this year. Part of that is last year you only had 3 golf courses that we bought for. The other part is private. Questions? Fire hydrants. Pretty straightforward, 60 fire hydrants. New service and replacing existing ones. Item D, accepting the second half of the second 6 months of the Women's, Infants, and Children money. If you'll recall back for the September period, they gave us half of 1 year. They're now giving us the other half. So this does not reflect a net decrease. It's giving us back what we need to get back holding. WIC's one of the few grant programs that has not seen the cutbacks. Certainly not like what we've seen in community development. Item E, Airport Emergency Generator Task Order. The task order at the airport's a fancy word for we're hiring the professional services that we need to design the transfer equipment, the sizing, the loads, etc., so that we can bid and add our emergency generator out there.
Which will preclude what happened last year when the power went out right after we opened, right?
It will preclude that in large part. It won't run 100% in the airport. The generator will turn the life safety equipment on first, which is primarily lighting and some ventilation. It will then pick up your elevators, escalators, part of the baggage system, and the ability to move the boarding bridges multiple times. The airfield is on a separate generator. It's actually been there since the Air Force. This will actually be for the building. We've never had one.
Back on C, what wears out on fire hydrants?
Metal on metal fatigue
Really?
when they're hit by something.
Oh.
The mechanism. Okay, here's my fire hydrant exercise for the year. When you knock the fire hydrant over, it doesn't squirt 40 feet up in the air like it does in the movies. The valve is actually in the bottom. It's not up in the fire hydrant. There's a shaft that goes from top to bottom. That big square nut on top that you see is actually opening the valve that could be several feet below grade. But those are moving parts, and they can do wear out. Marcus said he has a form letter for the metal fatigue incidents. We also have that same issue with light poles in certain areas.
So do they bury them because of freezing too? Would that water freeze?
It could freeze if water was left in the home all the time. It could. But it's primarily so that if they're hit, you can unbolt them at the flange. Take that off.
So no water squirts up at all if you have one?
Well, I wouldn't say never, but very rarely.
Just the
They should learn. They should learn.
Haven't you given my fire hydrant story before?
No, but trivia is wonderful.
We've done that before. Anyway, that's the truth. The valve's at the bottom. It's not up in the hydrant. Y'all want the fire plug story? You know
Sure.
We really need fire guys here for this. You've heard of hydrant called a fire plug.
Yeah.
All right. Originally on the East Coast and somewhere on the West Coast, when the water lines were put in, there were no valves or hydrants. So to access firefighting water, they then covered a piece of the line, bored a hole in it, and water came up, and you had both early on the two-man pumping deals. Put the suction hose down there where the water was coming up, and you squirted it out the other way. The fire plug was just that. It was a tapered plug that they hammered back into that pipe.
So whenever there was a fire, they cut a hole right then and there?
There's a wooden one.
They were wooden
Okay. Like you're saying, it's in wood.
Now, once they had done that in a few locations, they knew where they were.
Yeah.
And you could just uncover them, knock the plug loose.
Now tell them about the plug ugly.
So what?
The plug ugly.
You're way off track here, counselor.
It's really a fire hydrant.
It's
Fire hydrants.
Heard the phrase fire company?
Yeah.
Well, originally, most fire departments were fire companies. They were private, for profit.
Yeah.
When we put your house out, that's X dollars a month.
That'd be 100.
You two could live next door. If you didn't pay, I didn't put his fire out, put yours out. And he might well hire another fire company to do that.
Wow.
A Plug Ugly, rumor has it, was a gentleman that worked for one of the fire companies, I presume a large, stout individual that wasn't shy, and would run to the fire plug nearest the fire and defend it from the other fire companies until his fire company got there to get the water.
It's like a bouncer, a fire bouncer.
A Plug Ugly. That's what they call them.
Well, you darned. That's interesting. I didn't know that.
Modern privatization got kicked off with the company you hear today is Rural Metro, which you see in ambulance services, but they were a private fire company, predominantly in Arizona after World War II. I leave anything out, Dean? Any more fire stories we need to...
Okay. Then the last one is...
The last one's dedication and acceptance, different types of easements. I don't have any stories about easements, I promise.
Okay.
Okay, Mayor, if we could, we have Mr. Charlie Sanchez here today. Charlie, Michelle Bonner, Dean Frigo, and a couple of others are our lead folks. Charlie is the man on the ground for the Amarillo Safety Program. You'll recall a commitment the City Commission made about 6 years ago where we aggressively began doing things such as the Safety Footwear Program and others. That has grown, resulted in us having Charlie here with us. He's going to present kind of a year's results. I think you'll be very pleased to see what we accomplished, not only with people and their safety, and with good fiscal policy.
I think I have enough. I think I have 12. I didn't print off the full injury report. What we're going to cover is the executive summary and the graphs. My copy has 22 pages, and how we compile this is we enter every injury into our data log, and this is just one page of it. And we total up the recordables or the cost, and we start with this one, the airport, and go all the way down. So with that, on the second page there, after the table of contents, probably that first bullet is the most significant. That shows there for fiscal year of 10 and 11, there were 373 work-related injuries that were reported, and of those, 113 were the OSHA reportable injuries. 260 first aid injuries, 24 to 37, 373 injuries involved time away from work. And we record all those 392 lost work days, 1,587 days away. But restricted activity means that as the injured go to the clinic with the doctor, they are able to return back to work with restricted duty, probably light duty would be the best case like that. But it's been proven that our employees heal faster when they're able to do some tasks instead of sitting at home sedentary and just watching TV or whatever they're doing. So we get them back to work, and it's been proven that getting the blood flow to the muscles to the injured area, that they recover faster. The second bullet describes there the total paid out cost for injuries for fiscal as of September the 30th, 2011 was $224,812 compared to last year, which was $398,155. So that was down 57%.
So we nearly reduced those direct costs by over 50%. And then we track it further and average for the 3-year average, and we show there that that's down even further at 60%. The 4 divisions in our reporting area experience 82% of all the injuries, the OSHA recordable cases. And throughout reports in the safety field, you'll see acronyms, IRR, incident recording rate, TIR, total incident rate, ORR, OSHA recordable incident rate. These are all one and the same as far as reporting of the injuries. So we had, there as you can read there, 37 injuries in public works, utilities, fire, and police. Typically we see fire and police up there in these categories because of the nature of their duties and what they do. We see a lot of the police reports coming in, apprehending suspects, so on and so forth. Fire also, it has its inherent dangers in their work activity that they're doing. So typically, we see fire and police up there, but we're still, our goal is to still drive down these figures there. What we're most proud of there again in that second bullet is, and this is just it's just incredible when we put the numbers together that 57% from the previous fiscal year, so resulting in less injuries, less paid out for direct cost on that. The graph at the bottom breaks it down into the divisions, the first aids, the reportables, lost days, and modified days, restricted duty, in other words, on that one also there. And then it graphs it out to the 3-year average, and then each year, fiscal year, going back to, we only go back 3 years. So next year, 2007, 2008 will be off of this chart here, and we'll replace it with 2010 and 11, like that. Any questions on the first page? Comments?
Do you ever compare, or are there comparisons ever made to industry or similar industries for that public works, for instance?
Mayor, it's for what public works does, they're unique in the water. The only thing that we could compare with in private industry, for instance, like in public works, would be if we had to excavate, Utilities, that's pretty much their division, excavating, but public works is out in the street. It would be the work traffic control rate that we could compare that. So that there's not really too many industries out there that compare to what we do as far as private industry on that. So. Second page, or page 4 on your handout there is the cost comparison for the work-related injuries and illnesses from October 10 to September 30th of 2011. We see the one in red under finance. Unfortunately, we had just one injury in finance, but it was a significant injury there that's why these numbers are so high, because for part 1 and part 2, there are the less number of employees that you have within a division. If you have one injury, then that's going to drive up those numbers significantly, and this is what happened in this case here. So within our finance division,
it's not just dangerous to work with these.
Do what now?
It's not just dangerous to work with these.
No, it's not dangerous to work with these. To and from.
Is that true, Dean? It was a paper cut?
No. Dean was a brain injury?
Unfortunately, this one was there in finance because these numbers are so significant there. It was an injury, a fall, injured the wrist and hand. So we took a lot of rehab and plus the initial injury there. So that's why that was there. The bottom graph, there again, it just shows cost work-related injuries in the 4-year trend. 2010, fiscal year 2010 and 11 is our in blue, and the next one is a 3-year average. And these figures are the same as were on page 3. The statement at the bottom just reflects back again on the 57% reduction in cost of work-related injuries and illnesses for that last fiscal year. We focused on hazard recognition and hazard awareness. We looked at that, and along with the safety presence, we determined that played a part into the significant decrease in those numbers from last fiscal year. When we look at when we say hazard recognition and hazard awareness, we get a puzzled look from our employees because they've never really heard that term before. And the message that we try to do is is we break it down and try to convey to our employees to conduct the accident investigation before it happens. And we get this look, well, how can we do that if there hadn't been an accident? Well, that's what we're trying to move to from the reactive mode, that when there is an accident or an incident, we show up. Safety, risk management. And 2 questions that we'll always ask. And part one of the first question is everybody okay? And the second part of that is, what happened? Okay. Then the second question is, what can we do to keep this from happening again? So we had an incident, so that's reactive. So we're trying to change our safety culture, Mayor, to be proactive. Sure. And the part of that component to being proactive is to be able to recognize those hazards, recognizable or not, and be aware of those types of hazards so that we won't be having to do a reactive accident investigation. So we use the term to conduct the accident investigation before it happens. So in other words, just hypothetically, I'm driving a vehicle and there's, let's just say we're in an alley and there's something in my way. Before we open the door, we ought to, stop and think, okay, what's my surface? Is it unstable? Is it gravel? Is it muddy? Is there a hole there? From just going out there and then moving this object out of our way so we can proceed forward, then now we stop a few seconds and said, okay, here's what's going to happen in my mind when I open the door, step down on the step, and then onto the surface, which we could prevent trips, sprained ankles, twisted knees just by those few seconds of making a kind of a look around and see what's there. So that's what we mean by hazard awareness and hazard recognition. Page 5 there again is just graphed out in the previous 3 years. We can trend on those cost of work-related injuries and illnesses by divisions, and there on the bottom is the next graph. There is the number of first aids and OSHA reportable injuries. Now, we say OSHA, but there again, we could just put ORI, OSHA reportable injuries, but then we go ahead and instead of trying to use an acronym, we just go ahead and use OSHA because that's what ORI stands for in the reporting segment of reporting injuries and illnesses. So That's why OSHA is there, even though municipalities in Texas are not given by OSHA. And it drafts it out again by division on the recordable injuries for those previous years. Page 6. Now, when you look at that first sentence, incurred over $1 million for open work-related injuries, including current injuries and all active injuries. What this means is, the injuries that we've had prior workman's comp cases, those injuries are still open until we can close them. So those costs will be there, and it's just the nature of the beast that they're there. So that's what we mean by they're open, they haven't been closed. Most workman's comp cases, once all the injury is healed, so on and so forth, come back to work, then we can close it, and then we move on. But these are the ones that are still open. There have been some significant injuries prior to me getting here, so I'm not familiar with most. I think I know which ones they are that are still open, but I'm not that familiar with them, so that's why that figure is significant on that one. The next statement there on the impact of work-related injuries, we all know that that if we're injured on the job and even at home, it's going to impact our work. Whether the coworker has to pick up the slack, or we're not able to work ourselves, so that impacts us. And then the direct and indirect cost, just kind of put a graph in there. We've always heard the tip of the iceberg. We never do see below the surface, and that's what these costs are. We use a general term for every dollar in direct cost reflects 4 to 7 times higher in indirect costs. And we listed those indirect costs. If we get injured, somebody's going to have to do those jobs overtime. Did we account for property and equipment damage, productivity, investigation costs, and things like that. So those are the indirect costs as reflected by the direct cost in an injury. And then on your last page there, we have some risk reduction strategies to consider. We work hand in hand with the City Safety Steering Committee and we're going to go over this report with them when we meet again. And as we know, that injuries cost, that's the bottom line. So we've shown that for the fiscal year 10 and 11 that by reducing the amount of injuries, we're also going to reduce our costs. So we're going to be continuing down that road. We'd like to put a goal out there that we could reduce those injuries by at least 5% for each department. Would also reduce those costs. And that next bullet there, consider the performance for base cost allocation. Basically, that just takes into account that the active role in safety and workman's comp, and we can gain financially with those costs at the end. And then we put in there, to be accountable for our managers and supervisors. Could a performance appraisal, in that performance appraisal, would safety be a component of that performance appraisal? So that's what that last bullet right there is on that. But all in all, we're very satisfied with last year's report, and going to try to continue down that path going forward to continue to train and put out there to our employees the necessary personal protective equipment that they need to perform their job safely and efficiently, training, awareness, and with the component of hazard recognition and hazard awareness, and start changing our culture, safety behavioral culture to be proactive.
It looks like the employees are accepting that. What do you think? Accepting the change and working towards that.
I think, these numbers for the last 3 years, they didn't happen overnight, and it's going to still continue to take work. Like I said, when we put those proactive phrases out there and hazard recognition, hazard awareness, it was new to them. But we're after more and more. I'm visiting the sites more and more, and just getting their feel. What can we do in safety to help our employees do a much safer and proficient job out there? So they're getting a feel for it. I feel that they are.
That's good.
I think with their efforts come through by the City Commission, we've probably made more difference in the last few years than we would have expected when the initiative started. It's been huge. It's really good to see how everybody is coming into it. And here we talk about things like the money for the safety boot program and items like that. And, what that does, again, first is it's protecting our employees. But number two, it's a good and prudent investment for the city. So when Charlie put this out, I thought that was really something that would be nice to take a few minutes and we just kind of show that and see. He lives and breathes it every day, all day long.
I want to be called a safety geek.
How long have we had a safety geek on the
He's
payroll?
it.
But how long?
I've been here. This is my 14th month. So I came on board in December of 2010, and previous before that, it's my understanding that position wasn't.
Sean did a good job.
Well, the transition between Sean and me, there was a few months that we didn't have anybody in that position. So I'm picking up the programs that Sean had established, my predecessor, and using some of my experiences from my past employer and putting those components together and moving forward. But to answer your question, I've been in the safety field going on 15 years now.
Good. Also, the gentleman that personally hand-selected all those wonderfully colorful items that you got during your orientation lesson. Everyone still has theirs.
I put them all on Friday. When I do the lunch with the mayor, the kid, I tell him the policeman stands up, and I said, "Doesn't he have a nice uniform? You want to see the mayor's uniform?" And I put on the cover.
Just in Indy, those types of personal protective equipment is, that's what leads to these numbers. Or even a pair of safety glasses that have the foam vacuum, cuts down significant on the eye injuries. And it's just one component of this whole.
We may have to wear them to get out of the building today.
Today you will.
Yeah.
Any questions for Charlie or Dean?
Very good report. Thanks for your efforts. That's good.
Okay. We'll jump into the next discussion item. Mayor had asked last week that we put back on the deck and provide maybe just a little more discussion and direction related to the potential cell phone or texting while driving restrictions. So we have that on today. I think from a staff perspective, what we would suggest, we would draft an ordinance that you have reviewed. The last time this was discussed, it was told to send that ordinance back to the Traffic Commission, which is absolutely the appropriate body, and to have them conduct a series of 2 public hearings on that ordinance. I think based on just everything else that we're learning and we're hearing, we might suggest that we broaden that up a little bit. I don't think that this is an item that we can necessarily debate or solve here at this table. I think it's most appropriate for them. We have Mr. Downey here with us today representing the Traffic Commission. Of course, the City Traffic Engineer, Mr. Bird, and Mr. Michael Rice. Michael and Jerry and staff support to that Traffic Commission. I think as they look at this, some of the suggestions that we've had, they might want to expand that discussion to include certainly the ordinance as it was drafted. And recall that ordinance is drafted with the instruction of take it about as tight and as restrictive as you can get it, and let's see what works its way out. I think to do that, we need to look at they need to look at the existing cell phone and texting laws, probably on a state or federal level, state and federal level. The studies that are available on distracted driving, and I think we're learning that that's probably the correct term, distracted driving. The various statistical literature that's available that talks about the effectiveness or alternatively maybe not quite the effectiveness of these restrictions. I picked one out that I've actually used for years thinking it was going to happen and it never has, and that's what is the state going to do? I really thought as we headed into the 2011 legislative session that the state of Texas was going to fix it. And of course there was a bill that was ultimately vetoed, so obviously that didn't fix it. Related to that, I think it's important that we keep on the table, though, that in Texas you do already have these restrictions. Certainly in school zones as a local option, but on all, quote, young drivers as a condition of their provisional license. I think if we tie that together, of course, provide again the support for Amarillo's law enforcement and our city legal staff, if they're able to grab all of that and pull that together and conduct those hearings, and ultimately come back to this body with a recommendation that would be effective and would be plausible, and ultimately would increase public safety, which is the goal of the discussion. So with that, I can kind of push up.
I think what we discovered last week of study is that a lot of this information is counterintuitive. It takes some study to figure out what you're really doing. And it surprised me. I mean, it just surprised me at what I don't want to draw any conclusion for the traffic committee, but I think their job is to study this and see what effect it really has, and to see if we really can affect this in a positive way or not. Because there's some pretty counterintuitive things there.
It's Highway Law Data Institute, so it's in this sunset.
But they even say that
It shocks me.
It is a shocker. When you get drill down to why accident rates go up after people pass this, without reading the conclusive part of the discussion, we just read the stats. You and I talked about it here, and I bounced it off about 6 people. Everybody came up with the same idea that they said in the study was people begin to hide while texting. The other thing that I think feeds into that we need to look at is the stats show that it's mostly over 25-year-olds that cause the numbers to go up. The younger people seem to know how to hide it and do it because they do it all through school. But it's over 25-year-olds. The other thing I think leads into that is that when I send a text, I want to put commas in, I want to do it properly, and they can care less. And so they just type in some things and send it, and I'm sitting there trying to figure it out if I'm over 25 and do it properly. What I think is proper. There's a lot of counterintuitive. There's not a simple answer to this. You can't. I mean, it's pretty darn interesting. So I think your task is to study and see this.
I was so disappointed by the results they got that I went and looked up who these people were because I didn't trust them. But they're legitimate.
They're legitimate.
Yeah. So I was like,
there's plenty of other data that suggests that too. We each got a letter from a lady here in town that said, study this, this, and this before you decide. And the fact is, the only one I've come up that works is this sign that was out there and it says, honk if you love Jesus, text while driving if you want to meet him.
For the record, that did not come from my research.
That came from my research.
I think that your recommendation is probably the proper course to take, and let the traffic commission do the studying and know whether we need to go down that road or just go into the public relations campaign to get people to stop doing it on their own volition without any rules and regulations.
Technology will catch up with us someday because if you think about it, if they put a proximity device in the steering wheel column, then each phone has to have a recognition chip. If it's in there, it's in a certain area, it won't allow it to work. And that's what it'll come to through the NTSB, probably, recommended through this, and whether the states do it or the federal government does it. The other problem is you see this is there's so many different laws as you drive through the state. You almost have to have a map saying what you can and can't do.
Well, and ultimately, we're going to have cars that drive us where we go.
Well, this
And that's not that far off.
No, it isn't. It isn't. But fixing this one will probably come from technology.
Who was it that announced the new car that has a Facebook and Twitter?
Kia.
Is it Kia? The interface is built into the car now?
Oh, for God's
Audi
sake.
has it. There's about 7 brands that have that now.
Can you do that while you're rolling?
I don't know. I haven't
Well,
driven one,
what the N2 Speed is saying is if you're over 2 miles an hour, it's got to shut off. The screen has to go blank or back to the standard equipment, like a radio or whatever. But that's all going to change in the next few years. And last night they were showing a new cell phone that was on a piece of plastic that was about half this size, and you fold that piece of plastic out and the whole cell phone lights up. They said it's about a year away.
So some clarification, you're not looking for a 1 cent recommendation, pass the ordinance, reject the ordinance, you're looking for a
Absolutely
comprehensive report from the Traffic Commission.
To study the data and see if this really has any effect or not. I mean, we don't need to pass an ordinance if it has no positive effect.
Well, the Commissioner said it well. You know, it ranges from what you have before you as that draft ordinance. It's probably your upper limit running through the gamut of maybe the answer is what we've tried before, and that's you've just got to make people aware and expect them to modify their own behavior or something in between the two. So,
Well, if that's the case, I wonder if we can come back and discuss a really ongoing project of public awareness.
I think that's well within that board's purview. They do have the funding that we set aside early mid-December, if I recall correctly. That we did 25. So I mean, funds are there for that. I think that was kind of put on hold pending what we may or may not do with these other restrictions. But I think that entire set of ingredients is out there for them to work on and bring back to.
You know, when I was on the traffic commission, I chaired we had a subcommittee that looked at the cell phone, the texting ban, and in interest of getting the work done, more rapidly, but we had a subcommittee that met often. So I guess that traffic commission could do that if they wanted to. Is it up to them? How they do that?
They can. Absolutely, they can make whatever they need as far as subcommittees. Of course, there'll be some full board discussion and then the hearings. You've got an excellent group on that board. I think this is actually a pretty huge assignment for them to work on.
Yeah.
It's going to take them a bit.
There's another part of this that seemed pretty counterintuitive we might just mention, and that is that if they look at the studies about distracted driving with hands-free versus hands-on use, there's almost no difference. There's 3% difference in those, 3 to 4% difference in the distraction rate from those studies. So if you say hands-free, you got about 3% difference of using the phone. I think there's so many things here that
It's a big issue. It's obviously a safety issue, but a lot of literature starts pointing in the direction that it's distracted driving rather than it's a particular.
There's also a study that says that before texting, they had about the same kind of accident rates because people tend to get distracted no matter what's there. They find something to distract themselves with driving, whether it's phones or... Yeah. So even if you do it, they're still distracted driving.
What I read that I didn't test, because it's probably true as it applies to me, was that an adult, not a young adult, that is trying to text will take their eyes off the road for 4.6 seconds out of every 6 seconds.
And it takes 23 seconds for the average text, so that's 3 or 4 times.
It's me longer.
It can be longer than that.
And if they're hiding it, so the police don't see it.
Complicated.
Yeah, it is.
It's obviously
So
a
we're-
safety concern.
Yeah. So we're just going to go ahead and pass it on to the traffic commission?
Thank you, Ben.
No problem. That's all.
And Jerry, we're glad you get to get started with something easy and smooth.
Yeah, this, nothing emotional about this.
Okay. Well, thank you all. We will do that. And I think the next time it'll be before this body is when we start hearing either the presentations or the recommendations from the Traffic Commission. Everybody get their copy of the...
Yes, it's good.
Thank you. We have an acronym. It's called a PAPR. Dean staff puts those together. I think this is a new step for us. It's a great step.
I think that's-
We've got hundreds and hundreds and hundreds, so please, take these home, give them to all your friends, your family, take them to Rotary, take them to Lions.
Yeah, for speeches.
Give them to your elementary school kids.
Works better than our little gray deal even.
Yeah, a little section. Yeah,
Let's,
it's pretty good.
It is pretty.
Very well done.
He and his crew put that together.
Dean?
Francis did most of it.
This is, short and simple, and people can understand what, where the money is.
Is this a GFAO product, government?
Finance officers, and we'll submit it for award, and I bet it wins.
Were you on the selection?
He's a believer.
It's very well done, Dean. Thank you.
Any of those that y'all want, no seriousness, let us know. We've got plenty of them. And, we'll get it out on the internet.
How often are you going to do it, Junior?
They're annual. They're annual, so it's actually a summation of the 2010-2011 year. That's kind of your point in time reference for that. Boards and commissions. We want to talk a little bit about boards and commissions. We probably do. We want to do some closed session. We've got a couple of boards that I think we need to talk about in open session. I'm going to hand out to you a list, a roster, that shows who these board people are for these boards today.
It's BOARD, right?
That's BOARD. Little big D.
Sorry.
I have so much trouble getting the board appointments done. Second document that's going around is the resolution for your environmental advisory boards.
Oh, wait, I stopped.
The Environmental Advisory Committee is a little unique in terms of the boards and commissions of the city, in that it is not created by ordinance or by charter. It's created by resolution. And each year, usually in August, we come back with a new resolution that sets them up for the following year. Because I know we've all memorized these resolutions except for me, I thought I'd pass one back out and kind of let you see where that is. We have several vacancies on that board today. In fact, we have 4 vacancies on that board today. The charge that the board has, that it's currently under, is to continue to expand upon their success, timely and accurate information regarding the Go Green initiatives, work with city staff, including review of the existing city and private business recycling, reduction, reuse, recycling of materials. We added the new one, and that was facilitating the distribution of the bark from the city chip sites. Try to get all that out there. And then to evaluate and recommend financially feasible and publicly supportable efforts for community outreach and water conservation, including plan and implement xeriscape education, develop programs with nurseries to plant sample xeriscaping on city-owned property, and to serve as facilitators. I think probably that section C there that has all the xeriscape stuff in it, certainly that's essential to water conservation. I think it's a good progressive move in the community to look at that as well. So as you consider your replacements for the 4 that we're missing, that might be something that you want to look towards, is really getting the group in and get them started on the samples xeriscaping. I don't know that we need to change the resolution. We're already talking about planning it on city-owned property. I think some level of support from the Parks Department to make that happen, be that getting materials, providing the amount of water it does take to get them started. We have to do that to get that going. We do have some small samples xeriscapes. The most often pointed to is the one right out here in front of City Hall, kind of on your left as you approach the building. It's mature, it's nice. It's not quite as big as this table. It's not real big. So we'll just kind of throw that out to fit into your conversation and see if we can start working on some members and getting them moving.
You and I talked for a minute about some people kind of in the cleanup industry too. What do you think about that? Yeah, there's a young man that has got a company that goes in and remediates houses that are having problems. And he's going to have contacts with some of the recycling companies too. I was wondering, there's a different avenues that's involved in that. I don't know. Or do you have some?
No, I asked Amber Spencer and Angie Hanna. I mean, I suggested them because they were partners for the Zero Tech stuff, and Angie, you know, everybody. But Amber Spencer's still a pain in the wanting to do the Zero Tech stuff. So.
How can we broaden the view of that a little bit to draw some other people that would participate?
Well, I wondered whether John Keel of RPC could come talk to the group about the way other cities have made money recycling.
Yeah.
And I've got in my own mind, I've got a likely suspect of a private business that might partner with some zero-scape plants. And so I didn't know whether I should go talk to that person or whether I should get the people on the committee to go talk.
I don't think it would hurt for you to visit with them, but I think they should probably work with that committee.
Yeah, let's just kind of turn them over to the committee if they were game. But I think I think if John Keel talked to them about ways other cities have made money in recycling, or that might lead us to.
And I talked to John and told him that we have some interest in learning how that co-op is working with the Central Texas Bunch. He's willing to come and talk to him later.
And is it Michael Rice? He's here. You're
this is my
that person.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. So, why don't you invite John Keel to come talk?
John's more than welcome to come. Candidly, the whole issue about the recycling thing, I think what you're seeing as far as the people that are here that are kind of stepping off, what I'm getting from several of these is they really want to be an action committee, and this is an advisory committee, and they really have focused in on the xeriscaping, and they're working with Larry as far as what's going on with the new education facility at the zoo. I know that they're working on that. They're also at this point going to be contacting all the different kids in town, talking to them about some potential modification of some of those common areas so that people can actually see what's going on. Rose Martha's on our committee, Rose Martha Cakes. She lives in the colonies. She's talked with Matt Griffith. It's a hard sell because a lot of people, although they're not against xeriscaping, they don't necessarily want it in their front yard.
They can do my front yard.
Well, I think it's exactly that. There's nothing wrong with xeriscaping. It's a great idea. I think we're all headed that way. They're looking at putting together a list of xeriscaping native plants that work well in the area, trying to get the information out there. The recycling aspect, though, in all honesty, we went through that route for the first couple of years. Kim Vincent, who was on the committee, just recently resigned. She's with Allied Waste. She's the one that runs we call the BFI Recycler here in town. And we really pretty much do what you can do as far as a market and some type of business that's going to be self-sustaining. John can come talk to us about what can and cannot work. The thing that I don't want to do as far as a city is I don't want to create some type of recycling program that's going to compete with Kim and run her out of business. Even today, I know that it's a really tough market. It's very, very volatile. It's kind of like the price of oil. It goes up and down dramatically, and a small change can make the difference between staying in business or going out of business. The recycler that Kim is running, as a matter of fact, has had no less than about 4 different owners in the last 15 years. But she's done a good job of keeping that in place and working with that, trying to get those commodities that do work in this area working. KB Recycling, Chris Bennett was on that a couple of years ago.
He is still pushing the recycling. He's now pushing the cardboard program. He is competing directly against me now as far as the solid waste industry, going out and having his containers set there so they can recycle solid waste. And then he wants us to reduce our service for them. And it's fine as long as the service is being provided, but it's one of those things that it's all dynamic. What you do here affects somebody else down the road. And I'm happy for Chris, and I'm glad he's doing a good job, but it's cutting into our revenue, in all honesty.
Well, I thought John had some things that we hadn't thought of yet.
Well, I've worked with John as far as the PRPC in previous years, and I've been instrumental in the creation of some of the other programs that have been in place, both in Canadian and Panhandle and some of the other outlying areas. They've got what they call the milk run, where they've got an area where they collect the materials and they process them, they bale them, and then they have a milk run where they have a big truck that comes by and picks up whatever commodity they have. And that one truck is now able to go to 8 or 9 different locations to get one truckload. Because any one city by itself doesn't generate enough capacity to do that. We don't really do that here because Kim provides that service. She is the one that has a big area. She's able to bring it in. She's got the equipment. She's got the trucking facilities. She's got the contacts for the aftermarkets as far as selling it to the mills. So she already fulfills a lot of that need for us that he's already done in some other areas. Some of the other things they've done around the areas have dealt with metal. We've got a very thriving metal recycling business in Amarillo. There's several of those around. We actually collect metal ourselves. We do it at the landfill, plus we have all those running up and down the alleys, taking what people throw away, and that gets recycled as well. I'm glad to have him come and see if there's anything new that's out there. I think that what we've seen though from the previous members is they've hit the recycling, they've looked at it, they're amazed that we really do a pretty good job with that. And what I keep hearing from those, including Barbara, who's now the chair of this committee, wow, y'all really do much more than what we ever thought, because they've had great communication with the other staff members. They've had introductions by building safety, by utilities division, by parks division, by solid waste. And I think that's why they're looking at trying to focus on the xeriscape, because that is one area I think that we'll probably want to migrate to eventually.
My only dog in the hunt about recycling is just keep stuff out of the landfill and to reuse. Everything we can reuse, that's it. But I'm way into xeriscape because I think we haven't done nearly enough about that.
Well, I think that what you'll find, though, is that as far as the recycling, there is a cost factor with that, and we can sure keep it out of the landfill. It didn't make a lot of sense to spend $5 to recycle it when we can throw it away for $1. Yeah. And that's what happens in a lot of cases.
Well, and I think you answered. I brought up what John Keel reported at his last PRPC, and you've answered that, and he's not going to add anything to what you just said. I mean, he's doing it in areas that...
John's a very good friend, and we worked together on this for years, and we still stay in contact on those points.
The commodity prices are better than they have been. Then there's an accelerating gas price. And you've got to get this stuff shipped out of the region and process it. And then if you are one of those who buys the carbon footprint argument,
then it's better to throw it away.
Then it really becomes.
I know it's nuts.
Yeah.
Well, my dog in the hunt. That's my favorite thing to say. Is the xeriscape stuff. So.
Well, I think that they're really focusing on that. As a matter of fact, we met last week, was one of our meetings. We met over at Clover, went to their new greenhouse and looked at what they're doing in that area, just to kind of get a feel for what's happening. And
I'm taking these two gentlemen there tomorrow.
It's a really interesting facility. They've done a lot with it.
Okay.
Thank you.
The perfect circle part of that's what's fascinating.
Yes, you know I am.
Anyway, we need up to 4 members to put on that board right now. So. 4? You have 4 openings on that board.
No any gardeners.
We can talk about that now. Y'all can think about that and bring back some names next week. Either way, we need to kind of get that one.
Everybody on the board of the botanical gardens.
Good. You know, we might call Janie and ask her.
Might be a good cooperative.
Who wants to call Janie?
I will.
Okay. I think the next board that we need to talk about in open session is your airport board.
I have a suggested name for that.
I suggested names.
Bob Murray, Robert Murray, he was a pilot for a short time. His dad was interested in aviation, but more than that, he was a city commissioner in eastern New Mexico town for several years. Moved here with Wells Fargo as president of Wells Fargo. They shut down regionals and he just moved to regional presidents, and he moved to First Bank of Southwest. He's staying in the community. He made that. He's a good guy, and he's a good business person, and good, has an aviation background, light, but he knows about it. He's interested. I asked him if he'd consider it, if we'd consider it. He said he certainly would.
What's this one for?
Airport board.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he's a nice guy.
He's a good guy. Real level-headed. I agree.
Any other thoughts or suggestions for that?
Do we have any other names on the list?
We don't have any active names on the airport board list. We'll see that one on the agenda next week. We'll get one taken off the list.
Did you get a brief,
We have one.
Right, one door?
He turned one in when he asked.
Which one did?
Didn't Bob Murray turn one in? He was on your suggestion.
He's on the list, by the way.
He did. We could get one.
I think we have a vacancy on the traffic commission.
Right
We
now.
need to talk about the emergency care advisory board too. I think we can do those two in closed session, Marcus. There, with your permission, we could jump in and do the closed session work
Okay.
and wrap it up.
Sounds good.